No,
You
we've
have to be
got
good at
a heck
Doomfist.
of a topic lined up for this
Oh,
next segment. That's a bit of a conversation
whoa!
starter in the community, but it's also something incredibly significant to
This
our team.
is these are some heavy
We're joined
hitters.
by some really incredible folks on Team 4 who are going to
We
walk
don't
us
hear
through
we don't
some
hear
of the
from
competitive and
Scott that often.
matchmaking updates that we're going to see here in the mid-cycle
Wait, hold
patch.
on. What?
Scott, would you please kick off
Hold
intro?
on. What did Jody say?
Heck of a topic lined up for this next segment. That's a bit of a conversation starter in the community, but it's also something incredibly significant to our team. We're joined by some really incredible folks on Team 4 who are going to walk us through some of the competitive and matchmaking updates that we're going to see here in the mid-cycle patch.
There's a reason why I said these are some heavy hitters right off the bat, because these are the
Scott,
big
would you
important
please
people
kick off
that
intros?
that do a lot of this.
Give us a little overview on your role on the team.
Sure thing, Jody. Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Mercer.
I'm just gonna say right now, before we talk, this is one of the smartest people I think I've met, and I talked Overwatch with Scott at when I went to the summit in like August before Overwatch 2 launched for like. So okay, peel back the curtain a little bit. There was a lot of things that were like kind of presented to us and like talked about. And then there was like little breaks in between, everyone get up, go get water, go to the bathroom, whatever. We had like a 30-minute break. Scott spent his whole 30-minute break talking to me about ranked.
Sir, I'm the lead meta designer on Overwatch 2. And that doesn't mean I'm responsible for the hero meta.
With Gavin too. Gavin's awesome. You'll see Gavin pop in here every once in a while.
It's different meta completely.
Oh, thanks to 3 months.
What I do on the team is work with Morgan on matchmaking. I also work on competitive systems, player interaction and trust. I interact with esports teams. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk with Morgan today about matchmaking.
Hi, I'm Morgan. I'm a senior engineer on Team 4. I also mostly focus on matchmaking and ranked, so I actually work with Scott kind of an uncanny amount. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Welcome on in, you guys, and thanks for joining us on this again. So Morgan, to kick us off, will you kind of give us a recap on the
His Bastion shirt, you're right,
that went in at the beginning of season 3? What were those updates, and kind of what are some of the things that we're seeing and observing so far?
Yeah, so season 3 was really big for matchmaking. It was kind of
true.
So right after Overwatch 2 launched, actually, we were kind of thinking about like what we wanted to prioritize next, and kind of the overwhelming thing that we wanted to do was what we've called the role delta change, which is minimizing the role delta between the two teams. And so what that means is, before any of these changes,
it all makes sense now.
We were pretty willing to make a match that
between
could
the
have
teams.
Like a diamond level tank against a gold level tank, say. And even if the rest of the match was fairly balanced, in terms of like the ratings of the two teams, that matchup just didn't feel very fun. And so, those matches had a 50% win rate, but like it still didn't feel like a good match. And so we kind of wanted to like, see how well we could minimize the delta between the roles. And so we wanted to do that not just for the tanks, but for all the roles on each team. And that actually took a really long time. It was definitely the largest kind of architectural change that we've made to the matchmaker since role queue, even back in 2019. So we did that over a few stages. We kind of got like an easy win in I think it was like the season 2 patch. And then since that point, we were kind of making iterative improvements. And so season 3 is kind of the culmination of that work where, we've kind of like fully pivoted the matchmaking architecture to be able to kind of like reason about packing players into matches that in a way that minimizes this delta and keeps it so that the teams have kind of like this balanced role. This property is kind of weird. It's not. It's kind of hard to like get it for free, and so we actually kind of had to rethink a lot of the different components of the matchmaker in order to actually solve this problem well, not just in the normal case, but also kind of in the worst case, be able to do this, kind of in all cases. So so that was kind of the big thing that changed in season 3. Because of that, there was a whole lot of parts that we expected to get worse as a result of that. you
What if
know,
they'll
kind of
say
like
what?
in matchmaking, you don't really get anything for free. So by minimizing the role delta in these matches, we've kind of we've slightly impacted like other aspects of match quality that we're looking at. And some of that we kind of expected going into it because we just knew this was such a big change. But at the same time, you know, there are some things that we were kind of surprised at. Like, you know, I was a little bit surprised at how our expected win rate. You know, normally we try to make matches that are 50-50.
Mhm.
Um, our average expected win rate got a little bit worse by optimizing for roll delta. And that's kind of unintuitive. Like you would think, you
Interesting.
know, all of these measures of good matches would kind of like correlate together.
Okay, I have a small theory about this, and at the highest level, it feels like I don't know about all the ranks, but it feels like in Overwatch 1, tank diff was the biggest contributing factor to games. Overwatch 2, it's DPS diff. Tank diff still can be the number one if your tank is just an absolute moron and their tank is good. But if both your tanks are somewhat competent and aren't trolling, it's actually more of DPS diff. And the supports are kind of like the puppet masters of the tanks. So if your tank and your supports aren't synergized, you're fucked. But if they like have some synergy, then they can be impactful. But realistically, the top tier DPS players, the ones that can click heads, are just gonna run every lobby. I wonder if that had some sort of effect on it, because you now have all of a sudden players that are being balanced like per role, and the games where you have really good DPS players and maybe not as good tanks, the DPS players are deciding it, and the tank players aren't getting much of an impact. Same thing with the support players. And then the DPS players now they need to perform, because if they don't perform, they're going to lose. So like it feels like the dynamic of the game's changed quite a bit from Go to 5v5, but it's my own
But they
harebrained
kind of
theory.
don't. I mean, you know, if you make the one ideal match where everybody has the same exact rating, you know, then it's just a good match and we're willing to make it. But you know, oftentimes we can't do that, and so it's kind of like, which thing do we give up on first? And so
Some with Q times,
we've
I
still been
think.
tuning the system a lot. Like ever since it launched, I think we've probably made a tuning adjustment almost every
Yeah.
day at this point.
Yeah.
And we're still going. You know, like we're still learning. And a lot of that has just been, you know, seeing what goes wrong and seeing how we can kind of like tweak things to make things a little bit better. So yeah.
That sounds like some huge infrastructure kind of
Yeah, like
changes
the
going
big
on there, right?
architecture.
Yeah. So how was that perceived by the community? Like what was the how did they react? Because you said it has a lot of side effects if you make such big changes, like queue times are going to be affected. What was the consensus and the feedback you were given after implementing such big changes?
That's a really good question. You know, it's very hard to actually say with certainty, like, you know, how much better things got. You know, we have measures that we look at that kind of ground us in, like, okay, you know, we did actually make, you know, most of our matches now have these very close roll deltas, and like, you know, we've seen a lot of community feedback. I would say it's mostly been positive. I don't know. It's a little hard to say for sure.
Yeah. It's when you think of all of Overwatch 2 matchmaking, there's a lot of different people that are affected by this. You know, we're going to talk a lot about competitive play, but like this change actually mostly affects quick play, or affects
Real.
quick play to an even larger degree, because
Real.
their groups can be even more different in terms of like groups you can form. In competitive play, there are restrictions on who you can group with. You can't have like a bronze player group with a grandmaster player. You just can't. In quick play, all those things are
Anything goes,
possible.
yeah.
Yeah, you get some
Yeah.
and you get some really crazy groups, and the matchmaker has to do the best it can with it. And it's all this new roll delta tech that allows us to, you know, create what we think are like overall like better matches for those groups. And then there are absolutely groups in competitive play too, so you know, we get some benefits there. But like for the people that do play in groups with like different skilled players in quick play, all the feedback we've been getting is it's been great.
Yeah.
in some cases the queue times have been a little bit like longer because
that's really the main downside that we've
Queue
heard
times
so
have been
far
very
is,
long.
especially for large groups. Their queue times have gotten a little worse, and that was a little bit unexpected. I was hoping that wouldn't.
Also, quick play
get
feels
bad.
very sweaty.
It didn't show up in the simulations that we did, but we have some ideas for how to improve that going forward. It'll probably just take another patch to really get it good. But yeah, it's kind of funny. We get a lot of feedback. We see the metrics, and then we also play the game a lot, right? Like, ultimately that's kind of the best way to ground yourself in like what this change has done. And I personally have been able to feel this change. It's really interesting. Especially when you're playing tank, but even with the other roles, you can kind of tell now, like, who your rival is on the enemy team, because we're really trying to match you with somebody who's very close to your skill level. And, now in the average case, that person,
For tank, it's
like
easy,
in ranked, for example,
it's the other tank,
is like
but
within one division of you. So
one
they're
division.
very close.
So like Diamond 4 will be against either a Diamond 5 or a Diamond 3. Not a whole rank difference. That's very interesting. So they are really trying, at least for like the matchups, to be very close.
Matched with you, and so you can really kind of feel a little bit more of like that rivalry where it's like, are you winning that matchup or losing that matchup? And it's like, it's not like you're just going to get stomped either way. Like, that's going to be a pretty close match. And there's kind of a feel to it that I've thought is really cool. Of course, there's like the other areas where like, we're making slightly wider matches now in terms of the, if you look at like the best player minus the worst player, that's gotten a little bit wider, also kind of as a result of this change. And so like, that's actually something that we're going to be trying to improve. We actually anticipated that would get worse as a result of the role delta change. And so in the mid-cycle, in the 2.3.1 patch, we have some changes going that will actually help shrink that back down, hopefully even to better than it was before. We'll have to wait and see. The simulations were very promising, but the simulations don't usually end up like real life. So
no, for sure, we don't know what the system, like seeing how like our players actually interact with the system is the best way, like for us to learn and take things away from it. And I really like the way that you framed it as a big architectural change to this system, because like you tweak one thing and then you find out that one thing, like you have a goal for what that thing is supposed to change, but then it inadvertently affects these other variables as well. And so it really is a process getting to a place where that feels good for the people that are playing.
Yeah, it's been really interesting too. Like, competitive queue times used to be longer and now they're shorter,
which is good, very good.
Like in retrospect, like the system maybe wasn't actually working as well. Like the new change, it's like we're still making very good matches, but we kind of like for free almost got rid of a lot of the queue time.
Okay, so before he keeps going, the reason why I was against everybody, and I didn't really speak up against it because like I understand people's sentiment, but like if you've seen around for like the community, everyone's like, matches really fucking suck. I'm tired of these plat players, these diamond players. Well, first off, half the time they hadn't played yet, so like they were still affected by the beginning of season resets, and that was compounded from season 1 and 2. So like you'd have these players that maybe were like GM previously, playing on an alt account or another account or whatever, and then they would say they were diamond or plat, and they were in a GM game, and it's like they weren't actually plat. Like sometimes, yes, there were lower players. There were. I'm not denying that. But like there is way too many fucking people that would post every screenshot on Twitter and be like, look at this, and everyone's screaming. But it's like you got a game every 30 seconds to a minute. That's how you keep playing video games. That's how you keep playing, and especially streaming. Like you're gonna keep going. Like queue times being 15 plus minutes during peak days, like the middle of the day to like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 15, 20-minute queues is ridiculous. Your game will die. It doesn't survive that way. So it used to piss. I was getting kind of annoyed seeing everybody say that. So it's funny that it's actually interesting they're saying that like maybe the system wasn't working before because there was this idea of people saying, well, go back to the old system. I want more balanced matches. It was bullshit. You would wait 15 minutes and you'd get a 3-minute push game and go back to another 15-minute queue. It was this like thought that like every game has beforehand were these perfectly la-la matched games, and that wasn't true. You got like a few decent games, but like you still got a few decent games in the new system. You just played more of them. So, dude, I feel like it's just old Overwatch 1 copium players that were very used to their old Overwatch 1 ways where they'd wait in queue for 10 minutes and then they'd get a game and then they'd wait 10 minutes, get another game, and they're like, well, that felt better. No, it didn't. It was so.
Just because, the new system's like a lot smarter and it's kind of this like foundational piece that, gives us like a lot more ability to build off of in the future too, which is going to be really cool.
So what about players who queue into matches and they see this wide skill disparity? Like they're queuing in their diamond and they see a golden or
Here
even
it
more
comes.
so than that. They're queuing in at GM and see like a plat player.
Here
in
it
the match.
comes.
Like, what's happening there?
Yeah, that's actually funny. So after the season 3 changes, it was a really big change, and so there were a lot of unintended consequences. And one of them was we, for a short period, were making matches that were a lot had a much wider.
This is the yes, it did happen.
Somebody sent us a match that was like a GM level match with a gold level player.
It might have been two of your colleagues on the Overwatch League cast, Zoe, that sent us a match, and they were like, we were matched with this gold player. It's like, what's up? So we actually went and looked at it.
Yeah, we spent like a couple hours talking.
There was
about
actually
that
a lot
match.
of things where we talk about, which is why, again, it's like
it did happen.
Feedback about some of these things is like so useful to us. But like, yeah, we looked at it and it's like, yeah, there was a gold. The other things about the match, it's like they didn't realize it's like, the role does stuff was actually working really well. It had a gold on the other team as well.
There it is.
People don't see that, obviously.
No, you don't see that. So that was like, at the same time, it's like, oh, this is bad, but it was kind of good too. It's like, it's
like
working.
interesting.
Yeah, it was like working
match.
in a way we didn't quite expect. One of the big things about matchmakers is, the matchmaker is like, we put this constraint and then it's like, it's like, all right, push this down and like something comes up. It's like, you can't really push everything down all at the same time because you don't have enough hands. So yeah, it was it's definitely like something that we happened, but we know that we know the players don't think that's a high quality match, even if we make one.
So the system
fair.
So now they just they compress it a little bit.
A bunch of times too. I'm a platform
So they're still keeping the same way, but like instead of gold, they'll get like diamond
complementing my skills.
masters.
I was not aware that this could be a bug. I was like,
GM.
oh, you really think I'm that good? So I should be playing with GM players? Well, thank you so much. Shucks.
Yeah, I've seen feedback like on various like social platforms where it's like, yeah, there are a lot of people who are like that, or like, I was super excited to play with these players. I never get to play with these players. It's like, because playing with players that are more skilled than you.
That's true, but those players don't want to play with them. And that's just, I'm sorry, that's the truth.
Is actually an interesting learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
I feel
how
like
do
it
these
makes me
players
better.
play? Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me play better. But obviously, that's not how it should be working as intended. So
True,
that's not what we're saying.
but
yes, obviously, it's like we're gonna like actually try to prevent that sort of thing from ever happening again.
But
One will sneak through in a blue moon, but like it's but it's
we were
definitely
able
interesting.
we were able to make some tuning changes. Like once we saw the problem, because we add so much configurability into every change that we make. So once we saw that problem, we were able to make it better. I mean, we can never like have like a hard some players will be like, oh, I only ever want to make I only ever want to play like these perfect matches or something like that. And,
here it comes.
We ultimately can't do that. We have to kind of like eventually make a match, right? We can't just have somebody stay in queue for 4 hours.
Vulgar.
And so this was just one of the things where it was like we kind of hadn't tuned the system just right, and so we were able to, I think, mostly fix this problem, at least improve it. But it's still something we would like to improve even more.
Grandma, you made a good point. You make the point. Not even a good point. It's not even a good. It's the. That is the point. The people that mostly complain and say the bad cues are the nighttime off-hour streamers. You can't expect to get a high-level, competitive, quick match.
Your videos always cheer me up after a long day of work.
Thanks, Romeo.
For what
Appreciate
you
3 months.
do.
You can't expect to get a perfectly balanced, high-level, fast queue at 3 a.m. That's not gonna happen. You're literally insane. Like you clinically need help. Like you need to realize that doesn't work that way.
16
There's not
months
enough
and one of the
players.
best dev
There's
updates
the
I've
top
heard.
GM is
D.
0.01% of the player base. You know, it's also easier bait content to complain. I hate, you're right. I know you're right. You're 100% right, but I hate it. Because I personally do a lot of complaining. But when I complain about, I try to complain about that I think is actually fixable, and I try to construct what my thought process is behind why it's bad and offer a way forward instead of just give me magic matches in the middle of the night. That makes no fucking sense. That pisses me off. Okay, let's continue.
Or like, I think, ideally, as fun as it is for the gold player, like, we probably don't ultimately ever really want to make matches that have gold players and GM players together.
Yeah, that's the important part at the end of the day.
Back to the point of like high GM players, they are always going to be a challenge for the matchmaker just because there's not that many of you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, yo, hang on. What did you say, dude? Scott is probably one of my favorite people at Blizzard. I need to hear him say it again.
Ultimately, ever really want to make matches that have gold players and GM players together.
Yeah, and yeah, that sort of gets back to the point of like high GM players. They are always going to be a challenge for the matchmaker just because there's not that many of you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yo, I want that clipped. I want that to be a command. I want that everywhere. That is hilariously true. That is so fucking funny. I love it. Thank God. Thank God someone actually said it, because I understand it's annoying. I don't want to play games with gold players, and they don't want me to play with gold players too. There's ways around it, looking at plat and diamond and masters, but everyone wants these magic 44, 4,500 owl lobbies every day, all times. We're playing scrims in ranked. That's not going to happen. Like, it's just not.
So like trying to find like a perfect configuration of people at any one time, it's just difficult. So it's why, again, while we've had queue times come down, we've been able to make some adjustments there that I think have been really positive in that regard, but it's always going to be more difficult than your gold or platinum games where we literally have thousands, it's so many like different players, and like it's very easy to come up with much more precise matches.
If you're, silver to platinum, you're getting kind of the high population experience, right? That's like, we have a whole lot of players there, but, once you get really high up, once you're grandmaster level, like, the best way.
Sorry, I don't want me to cut it off, but people don't realize there was a massive influx of brand new free-to-play players. Remember, there was an article that came out. Blizzard thought they were going to be silver. They were wrong. They are bronze 5. I don't know how much has changed in the last few months since that article came out, but they inaccurately predicted the new ranked players and they are bronze 5 level. There are this many brand new free-to-play players who are top 500. I don't think there's a single one that have never played the game and picked it up for the first time. They weren't Overwatch 1 players. There's this many. So there was this massive influx of brand new players, but none of them are at the top level. So, you're still working with Overwatch 1 numbers.
To increase match quality is not any change we can make. It's like, message your friends and tell them to get online, because otherwise, like,
whoa, Morgan, though, we can't stack. So, like, what are you talking about?
there's just nobody to play against,
Yeah. It's
There's unique problems.
There's no one.
solved
Hey,
in the different ranks then, right?
there's no
You
stacking,
use one
though.
system, but it can't really fit all. Very much like hero balancing. You have different balancing issues in bronze as you would have in a GM game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we know that match quality at like high GM takes a nosedive whenever OWL players are scrimming.
Yeah.
What? Dude, there's no way they actually just said that out loud. This has been like, there's been a conspiracy of that for years. Because peak hours, it's always been thought of for years. Peak hours to play Overwatch are like 8 p.m. to like 12 p.m. midnight. Because all the OWL players are out of scrims and they're all playing ranked and they're grinding. Or in the morning, before 12 o'clock EST is the best times to play. because they're all warming up in the morning or at night when they're off after scrims, and that's when the infamous NYXL 4-stack used to play at like 2 in the morning and just run the whole competitive ladder. They didn't actually, because half the time they weren't actually trying, they were trolling, but once in a while they felt like trying. But like most people don't remember the trolling, they remember the trying. But that's not the point. Point is though, that is so funny. They are laying everything out on the line right now. I love this.
There's nobody to play.
It's absolutely a thing. But it's like once they're done with scrims and like, start like, hopping on and playing solo or someone else. And yeah, all of a sudden it's like, wow, match quality is like so much better.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So
People are right.
interesting.
It's really kind of interesting. Like at like gold level, it's actually pretty easy to make good matches most of the time. We still have edge cases sometimes. But
Real.
at that kind
Do
of
you hear
like, really
that?
high
Do you hear that,
MMR.
gold players? Your matches are fine. Stop copying GM players who are complaining.
Really the only way, kind of there's like this fundamental trade-off
man.
typical in matchmaking where it's like either you have better match quality or you have and longer queue times, or you have shorter queue times and worse match quality. And like there's kind of this fundamental
Yes, this is so
trade-off
important.
there. Like, we could make match quality incrementally better by putting people in queue for twice as long. Like the relationship
Real.
isn't exactly, 1-to-1, right? So
Real.
pro players will sometimes tell us like, I want, better match quality. And we'll be like, well, I could make your queue times twice as long, but that doesn't sound very appealing, right? But like there are some things, long term that we're looking at where we can not just make matches, better in one way by pulling from the other one, but where we can actually be smarter. And the problem there is it's just so hard. Like matchmaking at that high MMR, it's like this impossible problem.
Yeah.
But we can be more and more sophisticated. Like I've been, kind of looking at it as like, okay, so if this is what the queue looks like, and I was like a human trying to make a match, what would I be trying to do? It's hard because it's like we have to encode kind of like the wisdom that we have into, a computer program that's making, hundreds or thousands of matches a minute, like, in this real time way. But, long term, there are some things that we would love to do to try to kind of like start improving match quality at the high MMR. It's just so hard and so experimental. So like you can expect us to definitely try, over the next year or so, some things that hopefully will help. But I can't actually make any promises because it's like I really have.
He's speaking facts though.
Before we push like a change, like the role delta change, it was like I didn't actually expect the queue times to get a lot faster. I expected match quality to maybe get a little worse, but it's like now I'm like, okay, it didn't exactly turn out that way. So yeah, there's just a whole lot of work that has to go into really making match quality better at that crazy high MMR.
How do you deal with like cross-platform matches then as well?
Oh, this is a good question.
So in ranked, we just don't let players play cross-platform. So like either you're playing mouse keyboard or you're playing in the console.
Real.
pool,
Never change that stance.
Totally separated.
Never change that stance.
And you have separate ranks too. So if you're playing on the same account on both of those ranks, like you can in theory you can be like a gold level mouse
build a
keyboard
fort,
player,
build a castle,
diamond level controller player.
That's me.
I think it really speaks to how many different variables go into like our matchmaker and making these, like changing the system and the different things that the system can affect, like just by one small little tweak. So thank you for going into that and giving us a little more insight on that. Would this be a good time to kind of look at some of the data that we've observed from this role delta change and maybe how that's affected the game up until this point?
Yeah, sure. So so here's a chart you can see. Here's the average delta between two tanks in a match, a typical match that we make. And damage and support, we don't show them here, but they're very similar. Same dynamic. So you can see when we shipped Overwatch.
So these are sub tiers.
We were making very good matches in general.
So
but
point out really fast, just so you can read this graph at the bottom right. Example: gold 2 to gold 1 is one sub tier. So over here is it's on a grade of 3 sub tiers. So this was about a 2 sub tier difference. Now it's down to less than 1. So it's a 0.2 sub-tier difference. Oh, you can't see because of my camera? I have a different angles. Hold on. Wait, what do you mean you can't see it because of my camera? What are you fucking talking about? There's nothing up here. There's what? What? Yeah, but yeah, so just so you can get your access readings.
But we weren't really paying attention to this. And like I said, this isn't really something that kind of you don't naturally get matches that minimize this roll delta without really trying for it. So by default, in competitive, our we were making matches that were like the average tank delta was something like 2 divisions apart, and in quick play it was 3 on average. And average is like about half of the matches are better and about half of the matches are worse. And there was definitely, like, if you look at the worst matches, you don't see them here, but the worst matches were way worse than this. And so at this point it's like the teams are approximately balanced, but
Orange is quick play,
especially one of the things that
oh
we
yeah,
saw
my bad.
at
I got distracted because I was talking about camera stuff. Someone threw me off. But blue is competitive. Orange is quick play. Yes. Which also really does explain why quick play feels so sweaty when I play quick play. Because I'm GM1, it is trying to rank probably either GM1 or GM2 maximum tanks against me.
Was, you might create a match where like the tank on one team is the worst tank or the worst player in the match, and the support player is the best player in the match. And then on the other team it's swapped. And so like that just felt kind of weird. So so we made a couple rounds of changes. The first round came in the season 1 mid-cycle, and that got us a good chunk of the way there. But it wasn't until season 3 where we really were able to kind of like nail both the average case and also make the worst case.
Mods,
quite
can
a
you
bit
grab
better, too. So you can
Craig's
see
clip, throw it in
now,
mod chat for me? Thank you.
In competitive, our average is 1 division, which is very, very close. That's really within the bounds of, are you at that point? It's not really necessarily like an average skill difference. It's like, are you playing well today, or are you like exactly where you're supposed to be in terms of your MMR, things like that. So it feels much closer.
Yeah.
Of course, by minimizing this, you don't really get anything for free in matchmaking. So we can go to the next chart and you can see.
Whoa. Okay. First off, I want to take notice. They keep saying the phrase, you don't get anything for free in matchmaking, which is really a cool phrase to be hearing. Because there's a lot of implications with what they're saying. But so this chart, median expected win rate of team favored to win. And then blue again is competitive. Orange again is quick play. Let's see what they have to say.
By minimizing this roll delta, we actually made our expected win rate of our matches slightly worse. So ideally, we like to make matches that are as close to 50-50 win rate as possible. That's a really important principle for us of match fairness. And at Overwatch 2 ship, we were very close to that. This is median, so you can think.
Whoa! I just realized. Holy fucking shit! So, wait. This was the matchmaker's guess. The matchmaker was a 0.5% off on average, on median, of guessing whether or not you were going to win a game off of the jump. That is actually insane. Like, I have never seen something that close before for a matchmaker. It's not a 50-50, it's an estimate. No, right. So, like, every game, yeah, chat, okay, I understand. Oh, you're right. I should explain that because chat doesn't understand. That's not 50-50 forced Overwatch. What this is saying is that when you load into a game, the matchmaker makes a guess who is going to win based off of who has been put in there. And it was right within a 0.5% median for error. Like, it was always 50-50. And not 50-50 win rate, but like how good it was at guessing. That's actually insane.
50% of your matches are better than this and 50% of them are worse. And unfortunately, there is kind of a long tail here of progressively worse.
That's not what the graph
Um,
says.
but
The graph literally says median expected win rate of team favored to win.
we were
So it was guessing who was going to right, who's going to be right. And it was correct on 50% of those.
very close to 50% for most of our matches at ship. The first role delta change we made, it was actually a little bit unintended. We didn't realize how much worse it was going to get. So you can see in quick play, especially in the season 1 mid-cycle, the median expected win rate went up to 55%. 55% from my perspective is still not horrible. Like, a 55-45 match, the losing team, or the team that's not favored, still wins 45% of the time. So, that's not really something that I think, if you're playing a 45-55 match, you probably won't feel like one side really has a noticeable advantage. But like I said, half of the matches are worse than that. So it got worse. And you can see in season 3, we were able to somewhat improve that. Once we saw the problem, we were able to start kind of bending that curve back down. And this is actually, this is now a higher priority for us going forward. Like, we're going to keep making changes to kind of minimize this even more. Because it's really important for us to make matches that are really as fair as possible. The other weird thing about this is actually this expected win rate, it's role agnostic. So that means it doesn't take into account the role MMRs, that role delta. And so this measure getting worse is, in a sense,
Really?
It looks worse than maybe it is, because by minimizing that difference between the roles, that's also increasing match fairness, just in kind of a different dimension. So, it's a little bit hard to say, did matches get significantly less fair? I don't think so. They might have gotten a little bit less fair. And that's a trade-off that we're making in order to make each individual matchup within the match feel more fair. So, when we talk about match fairness, it's really hard. It's kind of this holistic thing where we're looking at a lot of different factors.
Yeah, I also want to hear about the
balance them,
stomps thing a bit.
It's very hard to make this
So,
balance.
This is actually extremely interesting. And if you're getting lost, to be honest with you, I can't honestly blame you, because what they're talking about right now is pretty high level. I'm very surprised that they're actually talking about this. This is awesome. But I do want to hear a little bit about like the one-sided matches you get, like those games where you load in, nobody gets like in a limb, you just get full held, 3-minute pushed on push. Like,
ultimately, we kind of have to decide which one wins sometimes, and we can't always.
Sorry,
make every
GM
match
players.
but at this point, I think the role delta changes seem like they're definitely making a positive impact on the game.
Sorry,
I mean, when you're saying, the way it feels in the game, if my individual matchup is closer as a tank, and I'm not just being taken for a walk by the other tank and completely stunned, even if I lose the entire match, if the individual matchup feels closer, then I don't feel like I'm getting the short end of the stick either, right? So I think,
totally.
On the opposite end of this, especially as you climb your way up the ladder, those skill differences become smaller, and you can feel like you're winning the battle and losing the game. And I've talked about this recently. You've seen in some of my games where I get a little bit frustrated, right? And I think a lot of people get frustrated in video games. I get frustrated too. But I'll get frustrated because I'll be like, wow, like, I'm not trying to be an egomaniac, but I played that game almost perfect. And I lost that game off of a mistake I made in minute 4. Like, if I in minute 4 didn't make that one little tiny mistake, which realistically in a game of ranked shouldn't really matter. You should be, as you climb your way up the ranks, you're allowed like X amount of mistakes per game. Like in bronze, you get like 100. In GM, you might get like 1 or 2, like decently small mistakes, one big one at max. And even then, it's still like a little bit, But it's like, you can play the game almost perfectly and you end up losing because like some other things. And that, I will say, is where it feels worse. But on average, that happens way less than you just load into a game and get smoked, like you sometimes used to. So
that makes a big difference.
It's a balancing act for
we're seeing in those
sure.
graphs the frequency going from like season to the next season. What's the philosophy for the systems team here? How often, how frequent do you make changes, bigger changes, smaller changes, any kind of changes to the matchmaking without disrupting too much?
Are they going to talk
Yeah.
about this?
So, I mean, going forward, matchmaking is just a huge priority for us in general. You know, with Overwatch 2, we've kind of, you know, the team's larger. We have more time and energy to really devote to making matchmaking as good as it can be. And also, it's just been a learning opportunity for us too. Like, honestly, since we shipped Roll Queue back in 2019, um, at that point, we had no idea what made roll queue matches really good. You know, we had our intuitions from before roll queue, but it's a lot of that turned out to be wrong. And so, you know, at this point, I'd say,
Wow.
you know, we've really over the past several years really learned what makes Overwatch matches good. And now that we have the time that we can really devote to doing the work, I mean, I would say we have probably like a year's worth of work that we've talked about in terms of, you know, this roadmap of all of these things that we're aware of. So, you know, in the long term, like this is going to be a huge focus for us going forward is making large changes, large improvements, you know, almost on a patch by patch basis. And then even smaller than that, like,
Someone said
you
they're
know, the
not answering the
season
question.
3 mid
Yo,
cycle.
my guy is cooking at like a literal 9,000 foot level. He just answered it now and said literally every patch. Let him talk a little. Stop jumping down their throat for an immediate answer because they're like you're looking for like a political answer where they just immediately answer the question. He was talking, we are literally trying to work on this we are constantly working on it, talking about how they're constantly working on it and what things they're looking into, and still answered the question. Just sit and wait for a second.
Has, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 kind of like smaller changes in it, including the one that I'm really excited about, which will it will shrink the, you know, the gap between the best player and the worst player in the match. It'll shrink that somewhat. And the way that one works is actually very interesting because what that change does is all it does is try to match parties that have a similar delta with each other. And you would say like, oh, you know, that why do I care? That only affects, you know, parties. But it actually kind of shifts the entire curve of match quality in the direction in a better direction because it's like concentrating these parties that are a little bit wider together, and then we can make more matches that have like only solos
Happy
or
3
you know
months.
you know
Flats.
duos that are like well paired, things like that.
That will be
That's
mostly felt in quick play then, right? This kind of change.
You know, yes, it'll be more so in quick play, but even in competitive, like I think it's up to what diamond that we allow 2 like up matches
Yeah.
up to 2 ranks. So like, you know, if you're a gold level player, you can play with your diamond level friend. That's still a pretty large disparity. You know, that's a much wider range than what I think what players would consider an ideal match, right?
Players definitely tell us they can feel it.
I'm sure they do.
And you know, I think ideally, you know, we want to make matches that really have as you know tight of a bound as possible. And so, you know, putting those parties together, I think, is going to do a lot to kind of improve that average case.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, that's an example of like I would say a smaller change that you know, we're thinking about those types of changes kind of constantly. And then in addition to that, we've got, you know, we have so many tunable parameters now on our matchmaker. You know, you can kind of imagine it as like an instrument or something where like every little knob has to be kind of just right. And so, you know, we've got probably hundreds of those at this point, and we're kind of constantly adjusting those. I would say, you know, last week we adjusted twice. I think the week before it was like 3 times. You know, it's almost kind of like a daily thing sometimes.
They just said that they are making adjustments to Matchmaker twice or 3 times a week. They are literally constantly fucking with it to try to make it better. That's insane.
Especially, you know, after the season 3 patch where we had a whole lot going in. And so there's kind of just like, you know, we really want, you know, every week matchmaking to get a little bit better. And, you know, that's kind of the goal for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. And I think one of the sort of important thing is we're not just looking at like the averages. Like it's very easy for us, like from a data perspective, to look at like, hey, here's what the average is. But like the reality of matchmaking is something we've talked about together is the community's perception of matchmaking is usually defined by the absolute worst cases, like
Oh my
those
god,
95,
dude,
those
this is the
99
best segment I've ever
percentile
watched.
cases. And a lot of the adjustments we're doing aren't just to the average, but are to specifically like make those like worst cases better. In fact, we've talked about it, how we're willing to give up a little bit of like quality for the average just to make those worst cases better. So
Real.
and that's like just one of the many things that we've been like trying to like tune around. And
because everybody remembers the best games and the worst games. Nobody remembers that average game where you won by a bit, you kind of won by a little bit, or like they only remember those games where you got absolutely shit stomped, or you had some player that was dog shit, like you had a gold player in your Masters Plus. Those are the games people remember. They don't remember the pretty balanced, close win, close loss. Like, they don't remember those. They only remember the shit ones or the really good ones.
This entire system is so complicated, and we've added this like major third axis of quality, not just in win expectation and actually like queue time, but now there's this like, hey, getting the roles to like match together like appropriately. That finding the right knobs. A lot of times we'll make a change and we'll be like, that didn't do exactly
Craig.
what we thought it does, but it's like, it's cool that we know that like if we mess with that knob, that's what it does, because the system is so complex that like, and there's just constraints everywhere. And it's like by changing one constraint, the thing you didn't think really meant something, all of a sudden like becomes super important. And like, so, but we're trying, we're just like, it's just like almost daily, like changes, making
Almost
sure it's
daily.
like, we get immediate like responses from live ops. It's like, we really messed with queue times. Oops. Or we just get like a lot of like anecdotal feedback from everyone on the team and everyone on Reddit, and, like everyone, like, all the streamers, like the entire community, and all that feedback is super useful. Because again, that's at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is make these matches.
Oh man.
There's like the concept of mathematical absolute fairness, which I think we really like in Overwatch 1 like really concentrated on. But like when Overwatch 2, we're really trying to say it's like, all right, there's more.
Hey, don't you say they're on to me. Hey, don't you, hey, fuck off. Hey, don't you, no.
Match quality than just that. And that's what you're seeing, like, with these like role delta changes, other changes that we're doing, like in future, like we know that, there's a lot of like, people saying it's like, wow, queue times in arcade can be really bad.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
true.
something we need to fix.
We're looking at that. There's other like things we've been like sort of looking at. It's like, it's like if you play quick play and then go in competitive, it's like the different like queues. Sometimes you can have like different experiences, and we want to make a more holistic sort of view of like how skilled you are. There's a lot of things that we really want to
totally
improve
agree with
forward
that take.
Again, I think
quick play and comp shouldn't feel the same.
Play, whether it's competitive, whether you're in bronze, whether you're in GM, will give you a better experience through matchmaking.
Yeah, I really appreciate how your team seems to be taking a really analytical approach. And part of that is the data that we see in simulations before things go live. Part of that is looking at data after things have gone live. Part of that is listening to community feedback and seeing what the player experience is. Part of that is us experiencing it ourselves. It sounds like there's so many different routes and so many different avenues that affect our decision making. And for me, it's comforting to know that like this is a system that like we don't see ourselves like reaching the absolute perfect. Like this is something that we're
You
going
never
to
get it
continue
perfect.
to iterate on, and we'll always be growing and developing. As you said, almost daily matchmaker changes go in.
Absolutely. I think like
Hold up. Am I reading a conspiracy against me right now? What is going on? I hold on. Did I please just put a hog mains in his lobbies? I'm sure there's a knob for that. It's called the flats knob. We can turn it harder. You guys know I'm going to be in LA in like 4 days, right? I'm just saying. I'm going to be up your backyard in about 4 days. I'm going to go. Hey!
I've thought of like what is the ideal matchmaker. Honestly, we are like so far away from what that could be. It's really exciting because I think we just have we have like a roadmap that could
I will
span
find the knob.
years that's like meaningful improvements every step of the way. And yeah, it's really important to stay grounded. I think, like if you asked us a year ago what we thought would be important today in terms of matchmaking, like we wouldn't have given the same answer. Staying grounded, like you're saying, reading all the data, running hypotheses, testing, changes live. All of those are really good ways for us to, test our theories. I feel like our hit rate on, like if we make a guess of like, oh, we think this is a good change, I think maybe we get it right about 25% of the time.
Damn!
Like that.
Why did you say?
Inevitably, when we're working on a change, something about that to challenge our initial conception of what we thought was going to happen. And so, very important to stay mindful of that.
It's part of the science, right? Like game dev being like an art and a science. Like we're
real.
trying new things, and
actually
not proving
real
things to be true, but finding out what's not true and then iterating off of that. And I think that's really, really neat and really interesting. And I also really appreciate you framing up Matchmaker from the perspective of different game modes. I know that for me, when we first started having discussions about Matchmaker, I was approaching almost all of those discussions from a competitive perspective. But Matchmaker exists everywhere in Overwatch, and I really appreciate you painting the different like places in game, like how it affects quick play different than it affects competitive, and that's really interesting for me.
Just for the general understanding for everyone who might not be so intimately familiar with all those different systems in place for Matchmaker, how are you using the same system for each and every different mode? Or do you have to make different kind of systems? It's a great question. Or like cut something out of one to make it work for arcade, to make it work for competitive, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually that kind of speaks to kind of the complexity of the overall system. So we do have a single converged architecture that runs across all of our queues. The thing is, because we want something different out of competitive role queue versus, arcade, we have a lot of configuration that is kind of per queue. And we're actually working on kind of a new layer of that even, that gives us even more fine-tuned control. So because
that explains
at the
a
end
lot.
of the day, like there's some stuff that only runs for role queue, like ironically I made this role delta also work for non-role queues because I really wanted to reuse the tech. So the way it works for non-role queues, it's an interesting idea. In role queues, you only ever have 2 of a single role on a given team at most, but in non-role queues you have 5 players of no role, right? So I made the system care about the highest and lowest MMR player of each team, and kind of in that way you can think of it as a 5v. It's like 5 of role none versus 5 of role none, and we're still reusing the system. It needs to be tuned differently, but like we can kind of reuse some of the tech. So sometimes
that's very
it's kind
interesting.
Of like, can we find a way to make the same system make sense across multiple queues? Because there's kind of actually a configurability nightmare if we have to manage like 30 different queues, all of which have subtly different behavior.
Look at this guy, he's so excited about his algo. It is actually really cool and refreshing to see like when they talk about very like specific things like that. You can tell like very, very passionate about this system and how much work they've put into it. And you can see, like, when they were talking, like, very early on, like, it was like, oh, yeah, matchmaking, But then when they talked about roll delta, like, they pop up and they're like, they're a lot more into it. It's so cool to see stuff like that.
If there's a problem with
like
one,
people
we're
light
never
up.
even going to find that because it's like a needle in a haystack at that point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a great question. And it's a major, it's something we think about a whole lot.
Awesome. I'd love to hear like any final thoughts on matchmaking, or if there are any other questions that you have, Zoe, or anything that you guys want to input. Otherwise, I think I'm going to shift gears and talk about competitive.
I'd love to dive into competitive, honestly.
Yeah, because
all right, let's go.
We're going to competitive? Oh my god, I thought that was going to be the end. Also, I think I'm going to need a refresh again because I think I'm pretty much because I watched a little bit, then I did patch notes, and then I came back. But I want to give some thoughts really, really fast. And I'll actually probably refresh it. So we're at 1 hour, 20, and 48 seconds. Okay. Some small thoughts. So we never knew that all the systems technically were like one, just like small tuning, which is good to know. My own personal take is that arcade, especially, and maybe even
First
quick play.
person I've ever used Prime on. Love the content. Thank you, Flats.
It's very kind. Thank you, Port. Appreciate it. I think that those should have all very little matchmaking, like very, very light. It's very rare you're going to bump into an extremely talented player. And I think there's an important segment that came early. They were talking about the gold player match that they had that was submitted. You know, it was a gold player in a GM lobby. It was something that they said that was very, very important to me. That they said that it was a really cool, it's kind of a cool experience though for the gold player to play in a match with, you know, some big streamer or some pro player or some analyst from the Overwatch League desk, like some like name that they recognize, or some very talented player. There are so few of those, right? We talked about it. They're the 0.01% of the player base. I don't think it's that bad if you play quick play a bunch of games and you bump into one of those players once a day. Like if the matchmaking was a lot lighter and you just randomly rolled into, let's say you randomly rolled into me in a quick play game, right? I think it gives a very different perspective to who that player is. Because with the really tight matchmaking, if you're like bronze to plat, even gold, you'll never see me in a quick play game. I could queue all day, you never even see me. But if you loosen it up to kind of everybody, or like mostly everybody, at that point, you have these more cool experiences where you'll, as a lower player, play against really high, extremely good players once in a while. Not all the time, but once in a while, you'll play against really good players, and you'll be like, holy shit. That guy was insane. Like, that guy was nuts. And I remember when I used to play COD back when I was a kid, when I was like 12, 13 years old, I was pretty good at COD. I'd play COD, you win a lot of games, lose a lot of games. And then every once in a while, you just bumped into that absolute nutcase who was like 50-1, just rolling the whole lobby. And you're like, that guy's just like a god. Who is that? That is something that is kind of taken away in skill-based matchmaking. But in comp, absolutely never happened. But I think for games that are like arcade or unranked, I don't think it's that bad. I think that unranked should not feel like comp, and I think arcade especially, to keep fast queue times, it's okay to bump in extremely talented players, because that lower new player base of players from free-to-play that we talked about, that's so like, there's millions of them compared to like the 1,000, 2,000 high-level players there are, mix us in, you'll only see them every once in a while, and I guarantee that, one, it would be a better experience for everybody overall, and two, your queue times would get better, and three, you would have this less of a feeling of like, oh, I had to go play arcade for 5 games. I had to go sweat my ass off for 5 games. Because I don't like loading into arcade and feeling I have to throw it into like 6th gear and lean back like, all right, here we go. I gotta go 110 miles an hour. I gotta try hard this game. Like, arcade's supposed to be for fun. That's the point. So that's my small take on the unranked / quick play aspect, but I know that they still need to put more systems in for that to happen. Okay, 120.48. So that's my take on it. So all right, let's move on. Sorry, Jody. We were paused on this beautiful photo for too long.
On the season 3 updates that we saw, and kind of explain like why we made those changes.
Sure. So season 3, sort of, we've done a few things like for competitive play. We changed the UI a little bit. We made we added specifically season 3, I guess this is where like so many patches.
Yeah.
I'm getting them all straight in my head.
They've done so much. They're like, fuck, when did we do that?
See, your competitive update screen at like any time. And then the mid-cycle patch, I think we're adding in like newer buttons for that to make it like easier to get to. Like made that like really pretty. Then sort of like we've also made some changes in anticipation of what we're doing in season 4, where the seasonal rank decay, we didn't put as much decay in. We nerfed it. Yeah, Morgan said it best. We basically nerfed it because in season 4 we're going to be removing that. So we didn't want to make it as much of a, what just happened. It's like one of the things that we've learned.
It's not a mistake. It's good to do now, but MMR should have also went down with SR or with the skill ranks, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. So personal disagreements on that.
About like competitive play, like in Overwatch 2. We made some pretty big changes, and I honestly think we just didn't communicate those super well. So like one of the big sort of takeaways from competitive play leading up to this is just people don't understand how the system works.
Yes.
So
oh my God.
A lot of the changes that we're working towards, especially like with season 4, is making things more clear for players. Getting, because people want to have confidence in, what they're playing. What they want to be able to set goals. They want to be able. There's all these things they want to do, and when they don't understand how the system works, it sort of works against all that. So that's one of the big things. Oh, and yes, season 3, we also changed the number of like wins from 7 to 5.
Right.
Which that was an interesting change, and that was something where it was originally 7 for like a very interesting reason that I don't think we really talked about too much. What we shipped with as far as competitive play for Overwatch 2 wasn't everything that we wanted to ship with. One of the major features that we were looking forward to was this concept of being able to provide players with periodic information about how well they're performing.
I wondered what happened to this.
Like on a hero basis. So the idea of like, hey, you have 7 wins. Out of those 7 wins, you played like these heroes. Hey, look at these, how well you performed on these heroes. Let's say you played like Soldier 76, Cassidy and Sojourn. Well, you played those heroes during those wins. Like, let's look at your accuracy. It's like, are you performing better or worse than like other players at your like skill rank? And we really like that concept because we want to provide.
Does that mean they're going to provide the info of what your average accuracy is for players of your rank? Like, gold player accuracy is 41%, or like, you know what I mean? Like, are they going to actually provide those numbers? Because like, that's kind of insane. Sorry, I'm going to back up a little bit just because I want to hear the whole thing again.
Because your accuracy, it's like, are you performing better or worse than than like other players at your like skill rank? And we really like that concept because we want to provide information to players to help give them goals, to provide them with like information about, hey, how do you get better at competitive Overwatch 2?
Right, because we went from SR to something extremely granular to something that was a little more broader with the skill tier and division. So it sounds like you really want to contextualize, like not just take away that granularity for the sake of making it less granular, but also it's very difficult, or it was very difficult to contextualize SR, like what you're talking about with like, how well am I performing compared to other Cassidy players? Like that context, it wasn't there for SR, and it sounds like that's something we're moving towards.
Yeah, and becoming better at Overwatch 2, like if you're the type of player who's actively trying to improve, that's a long-term process, and we really didn't feel like an SR value that was changing after every game was really sort of setting the right signals like for that, because when you think about it, it's like, if matchmaking's doing an awesome job, you're going to win and lose about 50% of the time, right? And it's like if you're, it's like if you're improving, it's like that 50-50 will still sort of be there, but the quality of the teams that you're playing with, like the quality of the opponents, it sort of like goes up over time, like as you improve. So that was another sort of big thing about sort of changing the entire like SR change after every match to this competitive update system, is really just sort of like framing that in terms of a longer term journey for players, not concentrating on like individual matches, which are highly variable for a huge number of reasons. I mean, that's, we talk about Overwatch 2 competitive play. There's I think this idea that it's like, oh, I'm gold 3, so I'm going to play at a gold 3 like level, whatever that is, every single game. And in reality, it's like, all right, some games I like got super lucky, hit a bunch of headshots. Other games, it's like, oh my goodness, I made this most horrible mispositioning play.
Fell off,
and it was just like we lost a team fight. there's a lot of variation in that, which is why which again we sort of just wanted to spread out like the updates, because again, recognizing that like any individual game doesn't actually mean that much, really, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so that was sort of a big thing.
There's something very important what he just said. Did you hear it? That individual game doesn't actually mean anything. That's legitimately, like, when people say they're stuck in elo hell, they always focus on a certain game. They're like, this one game, someone rolled into the enemy team and died and we lost. That one game, though, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean shit. Because if you play enough games, that game just disappears. Like, doesn't even matter anymore. So that's actually very funny you said that.
And again, to get back to the like another question we get from the community is like, why is it wins and not wins and losses? Well, because we wanted to do this report, one thing we know just from looking at stats is the stats you have whenever you win games are completely different than when you lose them.
Real.
And if we were going to do any kind of like apples to apples comparison,
This is why the gold damage didn't mean, or gold limbs in Overwatch 1 meant shit.
You would see them change, and you could get positive reinforcement saying it's like, oh, I'm getting better at this, because the idea was you see this report, it's like, oh, this is something I can get better at. You actively try to get better at that. You play not just to play, but you play with like, oh, I'm gonna like work on.
Wait, I just read something funny. Nah, it's every other game with the supports getting out healed by 12k. Are you a tank player? Are your supports getting out healed by 12k and you're a tank player? I'm just curious. Nah, DPS and support. Wait, how are you a support getting out healed by 12k? Does that make any sense? Also, newsflash: if their supports have 12k more healing than yours do, that means their tank is absorbing a lot of damage and not dying. So, are you a tank shooter? Because you're looking at the stats and not analyzing them correctly. Because if you're looking at and you're like, my supports are getting out healed every game. The most strong comp right now in GM is Brig Zen, right? The lowest healing comp in the game, other than maybe Mercy Lucio. The reason why that is because it's more about killing power and playing your life more than actual raw healing. So, I'm just saying, dude, that don't make sense. And if you think it makes sense, there's probably something else there. That's the kind of the point, though, of like everything they're saying. And I saw people talking, when they talked about the stats, people were like, well, if they said accuracy, what if you, like, I saw Chompy say it, like, what if you have a Widow that just doesn't shoot because they don't want to lower their accuracy? They need to show more than just accuracy stats. You need limbs, damage, deaths, ability usage to hits, stuff like that. Because you could have someone that say, oh, look, I have 75% accuracy. My rank is 35% accuracy. I'm insane. But your damage is like 7k lower than it's supposed to be, and your limbs is like 19 lower. It's like, you don't fucking shoot, dude. Like, shit, dude. So
on my headshot accuracy, or I'm going to work on particular like support ability, making sure that's more effective, making my ults better. That I think was like interesting, but unfortunately we didn't ship with that. So that sort of like we had to like it's like, okay, if we're not going to do that, even though we want to still do it in the future, but like for now, let's like, seven wins felt like too much. So that's why we changed it to 5.
Yeah.
Right. And that's sort of where we are at season 3.
5's pretty good.
And now season
I thought 5
4,
would be too high, but
we can start talking about that.
Oh,
you ready?
Oh,
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Cool. Season 4. So season 4, the big change that we're doing there is we're going to be removing the seasonal rank decay. So that was another aspect.
I still disagree with this because, okay, backpedal. Removing it is good because it wasn't good. What they needed to do was, when you got decay, was your MMR also needed to decay. So in Apex, if you decay from diamond to gold, you then play in gold lobbies until you climb back up. Let's say you don't play for 3 weeks and all the diamond players climb back out of gold. When you officially log on, you play against gold players until you climb back to your rank. The way the Overwatch system worked was if you went from diamond to gold,
Smile.
you still played in diamond lobbies with a gold emblem. That's how you got people that looked like in your games they weren't like supposed to be there. So that's how you got the plat players in GM games, because they weren't actually plat a lot of time. They were actually like low masters, but they hadn't played yet. So they were low masters in a GM game because of role delta. So you'd have a low masters player on one team and a guy who looks like he's plat on the other, but the other guy's not actually plat. He just hasn't played yet. So he was realistically low master. So they were both low masters players in that game, but it looked like plat and GM. So it looked worse to the player who was looking at it. It was like, what the heck? This player's plat. They weren't plat. They were actually low masters. And there was also a low masters player on the opposite team. The reason why this sucks is because it then makes your rank cosmetic and it's not real. Like, the rank that you're seeing is not the rank that you're actually playing in. And you can, and as a streamer, you can see this all the time. You'll load, like, let's say I load up into a game and it says I'm diamond, right? And it's like, well, Flats, why the fuck are you diamond? It's like, well, no, I'm actually playing in like a mid-masters lobby, but I haven't played support yet this season, so it looks like I'm diamond. And then like people are like, well, it says you're diamond. And it's like, well, what you're seeing is not actually the truth, you know? It's like, it's different. It's not actually real, you know? And so because of that level of complexity, it was hard for the average player to know that. And they even acknowledged it, that they didn't do a good enough job explaining to people how ranked worked. And so I wonder how they're going to fix this going forward.
Aspect that we were trying to add in with Overwatch 2. Going back in time to Overwatch 1, we got a lot of feedback from players like over time where they felt like there wasn't really that much changes between seasons. There's a lot of like sort of pent up demand for this idea of, it's like, I want sort of this, I'm going to use a strange word, because if I say MMR reset, Morgan will freak out because it's like the most horrible idea ever.
Don't do it.
But there's this idea of, it's like a new season starts. I want to like, you know, I want to refocus my effort.
Let me just say, Scott, I don't want MMR reset. I understand it's dumb. I want MMR decay. That's all I wanted. Just saying.
You know, I want to like start this journey again towards working towards greater heights of my skill. And there was no real way to do that, because for most players, what actually happens is they reach a certain skill and then they'll just sort of change around like different, like, you know, tiers or now divisions. So the idea was, we're going to like lower your division or your skill tier and division at the beginning of the season to provide that sort of moment of, it's like, oh, I've got another goal to work towards. I can start this journey again. So that didn't quite outwork the way we wanted to, for a couple of big reasons. And this is the big mea culpa moment of, you know, Overwatch 2 competitive play. One, we didn't explain what was happening. And that was sort of a big thing. People came away, it's like, wait, a new season just started. Why is my rank so much lower? Did I suddenly get worse? I don't feel like I got any worse in like Overwatch. It's like, why did this just go down? And so we didn't communicate what it was trying to do. And the other thing was, for this sort of like system, to create that journey, doing this every 2 months is probably too short. We looked at a lot of data with regards to like how many games of competitive people play. And there's a lot of them that maybe only play like 15 or 20 games, which isn't even like,
There's people that coast
the way we tuned it.
They coast.
It was going to take more than that to work your way back up to your quote unquote real skill level. And because they didn't get back to that, instead of this like virtuous journey of like, hey, I'm like going to get back, I'm going to like restart, I'm going to like, you know, try hard this time, I'm going to get like so much better at Overwatch 2. It was like, we lowered them back down, they got back up a little bit, and then we lowered them back down, then we lowered them back down. And it didn't feel virtuous, it felt punitive, which is like not at all, we didn't want that at all.
Right.
So for those reasons, and again, just to make things clearer, we're just removing it. So when season 4 starts, when you first go to play competitive play, there'll be a message that pops up saying, hey, we're removing this. We're also just sort of removing like all the effects of it. So we're like resetting everyone back to like what their quote unquote.
So there'll be one more reset, technically.
We'll pop a little up dialogue indicating,
get
hey, this is what your
pushed up
previous ranks were back in season 3, and here's your new ones in season 4.
So when he says the word resetting, it means that people whose MMR and rank do not align will be pushed more in line. For most people, that means your rank is probably going to get pushed up. So let's say you're gold and you haven't played that much, but your actual MMR rank is plat, like low plat. It will the next season be like, hey, we're realigning these ranks, and then you become plat. So
again, with the idea that, hey, we need to fully explain what's happening, because when we don't explain things, it's not good.
I'm glad that you guys
Yep.
are here to talk to us about this.
Agreed.
Like being here and communicating with us and the players it means a lot.
Yeah, I mean, same sentiment here. Like the transparency is really, really so important.
If you play a fuck ton, it probably won't affect you.
Just so complicated, so intricate, and as you said, you turn one knob and then everything else changes. So like there is a lot of communication.
That's a horrible idea. We already have too many people in ranks they shouldn't be. But that is a perfect comment, because what you don't understand is this will not affect that at all. At all. All it does is change the rank you see on the profile. That's it. The things that you're currently experiencing, and you're like, oh, these games suck, those players are gonna still be in whatever rank they are at, because the rank that you see is fucking cosmetic. And they just talked about how they've done a poor job of explaining it to people. You're a great example of that, because you think that this reset will push all these shitty people into your rank. No, these shitty people have always existed in your rank, actually. You just open their profile and it says, oh, they're silver, I'm plat. Why am I playing with you? Well, they're also plat. They just haven't played very much yet. So that starts a whole new can of worms of rank decay or MMR decay over time. But that's not the conversation we're having today. But that is actually, I couldn't have asked for better timing on that.
Which needs to happen in order for the people who play the game to really understand why things are happening the way they are. I do want to ask, though, why do people, or shouldn't people want a full MMR reset? Because still, like, that is what people like. I see that so often in the community. Like, why don't they just reset it? Please tell them why that's not what they want.
It's a good question. So like, I can understand the sentiment, right? It's like, if you feel like your MMR is not where it should be or something like that, you're like, just reset it all, right? It's really actually kind of fascinating. We have millions of players, and if you think about it, most of those players have never actually played each other, right? So by default, if we throw all of the ratings that we have out, we're losing a whole lot of information. Like our current view of everybody's skill, your individual skill may not be calibrated, but the system as a whole embeds a whole lot of knowledge about the relationship between all of these players, most of whom who've never actually played against each other. Like in chess, you have like ELO or something. And, the community of chess players is somewhat small, and like, you'll go to these tournaments and like everybody's kind of playing each other, and it kind of makes sense. But in Overwatch, like we don't really have that. Like, unless you're on top 500 or something, then you're actually playing with other, all the other people.
Yeah, we all,
that's a separate
everyone
problem.
in GM top 500 pretty much knows each other.
Generally with ratings, it's like, we
the same people.
really want to have some view of everybody's skill, and even a rough view is much better than no information, because what happens if we throw all of it out is you'll get games where like bronze players are playing against top 500 players. And we've actually done that internally, right? Because like we have bronze players on our team and top 500 players on team 4, right?
Real, I know who they are.
In those playtests, like those are not fun playtests.
Yeah.
Why not? It seems like a great time.
That matches only really feel fun in a very, very narrow difference of skill. Otherwise, one team's just going to stomp the other team. Overwatch is a very decisive game, and being like platinum versus gold, like that's a very noticeable difference in skill. And so, all of that information that the ratings have in aggregate, it's
all the silver and bronze little TikTokers coming in my chat and be like, well, yeah, you were good. You're not. Why haven't you hit every single headshot on Widow? Why haven't you hit every single headshot on Cassidy? Oh, you're playing against other top 500 players? Yeah, you're fucking dog shit. Well, what? They actually have good movement, know how to 80-80 strafe and play cover? You're terrible. Unleash me, dude. Unleash me. I swear to God.
It's extremely valuable. Like, You know, whenever somebody asks about MMR, I'm like, no, don't touch the MMRs.
Yeah, I mean, you essentially just break the entire matchmaking if you throw out the MMRs, right?
Yeah.
Because the information is
Yeah.
not going to be there. That means that the roll delta graph is going to go all the way up again.
Roll delta goes to 0.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
But not in a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's sort of this. There's a little bit of like misunderstanding about like how long it would take for the system to like readjust.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when these conversations come up, the people would be like, "Oh, it'll just probably take a month," and it's like, no, you don't understand like
Yeah,
how
that's
many like
years.
it's months, like years. Like
Yeah.
it's actually interesting in the sense of, you know, with Overwatch 2 coming out, you know, we're going free to play. It's like all these like new players. There is a little bit of like our matchmaking has technically gotten worse just because we have this mass number of people that we don't know much about them, right? You know, people try to compare like how Overwatch 1 matchmaking was right before we shipped Overwatch 2. And that's where we had players who had played a ton of games. They played a lot of heroes. They've played all the maps.
I've
They've
never
gone through,
felt
like,
so
multiple
validated
metas.
before
They were all,
until
like,
this stream.
very knowledgeable, and like the matchmaker's view of their skill was reasonably accurate. But when you bring in new players, think about like all the things they potentially like have to learn. Again, all the heroes on their particular role within just one role, all the different maps. Again, like they haven't been through like multiple different meta swings. And when we talk about like what the matchmaker's view of the skill is, you know, it's not as simple as like, hey, I win game, like I get better, I lose game. It is, but like the reality
The
is
amount is
the amount is like different. But like the other thing is that like as a new player, you know, the matchmaker can think you're of a certain skill because you've been playing, let's say, like you've been playing Soldier 76, and you've been having a good amount of success, right? But you're a new player, you're like, all right, I feel like I'm doing well in Soldier 76. I'm going to switch to Cassidy. All right. At that point, the matchmaker's view of their skill is wrong again. Because you're on a completely like new hero.
Yep.
Right. We also see other like sort of changes.
There's something very important about this, okay? This is why in old Overwatch we used to always say this. It's why I don't like. It's actually part of the reason why I don't make a whole lot of educational content anymore. It's just so confusing at this point. It's hard to tell everybody this like the same thing because not every piece of advice it actually is good for every player. But back in Overwatch 1, if you became pretty high rank on a character, let's say I'm a main tank player, right? Sorry, if you don't know what a main tank player is, basically in Overwatch 1 it was like Ryan, Orisa, Ball, Winston. I was not very good at like Sigma. And I'm still not that good at Sigma, but I've gotten better. If I went to go play GM games or top 500 games as Sigma, I'd probably get rolled. Some games I do okay, but a lot of games if I play against a really good Sigma player, I'll get rolled. I can walk into a game against Cloudy or Super, and I might not be better than them, but I will hold my own, right? I'm not gonna get walked because half the time, I mean, like they're not even like not everyone's full calming and stuff. Like I will hold my own though. I will do okay, and I will win some of those games. We'll make content out of it because, you know, it's a fun time. But the point is, if it was like, you know, Sigma versus, you know, another, like, let's say it was like Poco on Sigma. I'm getting fucking walked, dude. He's going to take me out for a walk like I'm a little dog. You know, I'm dead. You know, I'm screwed. So what we used to actually suggest was to make an alt account, make a new account, like a brand new account, go buy a new account for $10, and you would go and play ranked on that account and learn the new character. And the reason you would do that is because, yeah, it was like quote unquote kind of smurfing, but it wasn't because like you're a better player, but you're playing a new character. So like you'd probably fly through Diamond, but then get stuck in like Masters because you have the right mentality. You know how to play the game, but you don't have the mechanical skill for the character. You don't have all the awareness. You don't have all the heads up playmaking for it. So you won't play as well. And that was why unranked to GMs were kind of nice on a new character because you got to learn the character again, instead of going into top 500 and getting rolled for a bit, throwing a bunch of games until you eventually reset low enough where you can play the character. You know what I mean? And it makes it a better experience for you as a player. So that's why having a new account, an alt account, not a Smurf account, an alt account to practice new characters was really worth it because sometimes once you get too good or you play too high of a level, it's hard to play other characters if you haven't practiced them yet. And how a lot of players have gotten good at characters over time, like how you can see like certain players can play almost all the tanks or play all the DPS, right? Because they've been around for so long, metas have formed around those characters or new characters came out, right? Like, for example, if you've been playing since the beginning of Overwatch, you can probably play the whole roster of whatever role you play because you learned all the characters in that roster and you were able to play on them, right? You got practice and not everyone was insane on them, right? Like, if you go right now and try to play against Kai on Widow, you're going to get rolled. But back in season 1, when it was just like everyone was on the same playing field somewhat, you got to learn with everybody else. You know what I mean? So as new characters come out, that's why I can play Ramatra and be pretty good against a lot of people and don't play him a ton, because there hasn't been a hard Ramatra meta for a long time. When Ramatra was good, I played Ramatra too, and I could keep up. I have tank mechanics, I have the knowledge, I know how to play the character. But like, let's say I don't play Ramatra for 3 years, and Ramatra becomes meta 3 years from now, I'm gonna get rolled. So that's a big problem, especially for like newer players, and that's what they're talking about, is they don't have the experience of older players, and the matchmaker can't figure it out because the matchmaker also tries to determine that these players are already that good, but their skill disparities are so different because they haven't touched a character yet. It's borderline impossible. So,
again, it's been great to see all this. Like we love it, you know, all these like new friends bringing other friends to play Overwatch 2 who hadn't played it before. But when you play with like different groups of friends, that can sort of change what your skill is, because you might
sometimes
play with
your friends suck
differently than you would play like solo, where you're super tryharding. Right?
Sometimes your friends suck, chat. That's it.
Like all it really, you know, it really just has this like one view of what you are, and with new players, it's lots can happen to that. So that's again why we're like so scared witless about like, you know, like this talk of like MMR reset, because it would literally take like you mentioned it, years really to like sort of build up this like combined knowledge about like all the players. And when you think about like all the different accounts they have on all the different roles, it's mind-boggling.
I'm not sure if we want to share information on this, but I'm curious if you can give us a little more insight into like new players versus veteran players. Like you were mentioning, like for Overwatch 1, we had all this like data, and then we launched Overwatch 2, and a lot of these players carry over, but we also have new maps. We have a new game mode, we have new heroes, and we have a lot of new players. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious what your insight is there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like we've definitely so new players are something we've definitely like looked at pretty closely. Like we want to try to, again, because the matchmaker has so little understanding of, you know, just how good they are, and everything the matchmaker is based upon is this idea of like, how good are you, right? So we can match you up with other people of that same like sort of skill, and that's something where we've like tried to do our best. We've done things with regards to trying to like start them off at like a better place, so they're not like the situation we don't want is like, hi, I'm a new player of Overwatch, and we totally like misevaluate your skill and you lose a bunch of games because we think you're way better than you are. So
they talked about that before.
We've done work on that regard.
Yeah, we did a whole lot actually. Like, you know, when we were working on the launch of Overwatch 2, we knew, you know, that we were going to have a ton of new players show up. And we also knew that we were going to have a ton of people who had like played Overwatch years ago come back. And so, you know, we built systems specifically to, you know, try to make those players' experience as good as possible. And, you know, as a result of that, make everybody else's experience playing with those new players as good as possible too. So yeah, we did the, you know, we very carefully tuned, you know, kind of the new player experience in terms of like what their ratings look like when they enter the game, kind of how much uncertainty we have about them, how fast we move their ratings. One thing that's like the bane of my existence is when people do like unranked to GM, you know, like they make a fresh account and then like play to GM, you know, because like their first several matches are really bad. So like we added a system to try to kind of like, hey, you're like on a win streak that we don't expect you to be on. Your MMR should probably be way different than what it is. So thankfully, you know, we've like shrunk the number of matches that it takes for somebody to like kind of calibrate when they're just coming into the system by quite a bit.
I do feel called out here. But I never made it to GM, so it's not really about me.
And just to be clear, please don't do that.
Yeah, please.
Please don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, do they?
And then also,
Did they
like,
just
for
officially
returning-
ask people not to do unranked to GMs? Dude, this has been just like the most cooking dev streams I've ever seen.
players, you know, we
He's
we
begging.
did a lot of work to kind of model.
Oh my god! How?
Please don't do that.
How?
Yeah.
How are you gonna say no?
And then also, like, for return.
Poor Scott is begging over here. Please stop it.
Returning players, you know, we did a lot of work to kind of model, like, we kind of do decay players when they come back if they've been gone for a really long time, just to try to kind of like ease them a bit in. And then also we increase our uncertainty about them too. So it's like we're kind of like much more willing. Yeah, I mean, we treat them a little bit more like a new player, because it's like, you know, we don't know what you've been doing for the past 2 years. Maybe you've been, you know, not playing video games at all. Maybe you've been like playing a different shooter and you're even better, right? So yeah, a whole lot of work that went in kind of at launch to really try to get ahead of a lot of those things. But, you know, still a whole lot of new players, a whole lot of new uncertainty in the system.
Yeah.
And we've been dealing with it. I think, you know, that's probably the type of thing that'll just get better over time as people keep
definitely.
playing. Just, yeah. It's the answer to every question is always just play more games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To reduce
Real.
that uncertainty. That's how we
Yeah.
do it.
Real.
Exactly.
And to give the matchmaker a better like view of like how good you are. Yeah.
I've never
It's
felt
like,
so validated
that's
before.
sort of like the two things that sort of solve all like, you know, matchmaking.
I feel like I'm in-
things. Like play
You know
more
what this
games.
does? This feels like I'm in therapy. Like, I feel like this is like therapy, honestly. This is Overwatch streaming therapy for me.
And have
Always
more
play more
people playing games so there's even more people to potentially match you
Yes.
with.
Yeah.
Right.
I was just wondering what the team's stance is on actually displaying the team ranks, like when heading into a game.
Oh,
in
true.
competitive. Like, is that something discouraging? Because, you know, like very often back when there was like the team MMR in the versus screen right at the beginning, your team immediately, if they have a lower SR, would go like, oh well, we lose. So like immediate defeat kind of attitude. What's the stance from your team about displaying those kind of
Sure.
SRs, MMRs?
So that brings us to another change in season 4. Haha, there you go, Zoe.
There it is.
Not quite like everything I think you were asked for, but like we are going to display like before like a competitive match in that like sort of team screen, at least what the average like for this particular like game is. So, you know, you can see it's like, hey, this is a Platinum 4 match.
Oh, they're bringing it
Just to
back.
give you sort of like a better idea. It's like, maybe I'm a little bit better than everyone in here, or maybe I'm a little bit worse. You know, it gives you some information about that. Again, like we definitely like seen the feedback with regards to like, hey, I just want to see like what everyone's like sort of values are. Some of that I think is positive. Like we do get very pointed feedback about the matchmaker when that happens, which you know. That doesn't necessarily really bother us, but I think it's more just that we don't want like players to necessarily like hone in on like precisely like what those like values are, because a lot of times they'll sort of like they'll make judgments about the match before they've even played it.
Yeah,
like a
exactly.
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right, and that could be like that could be really negative, right? It's like because again, like we're not going to put you in like a super horrible match. You know, Morgan was talking earlier about it's like you know. 55-45, like it sounds horrible, but it's like, no, you win 45% of the time, right? And it's like, it's the kind of thing of like, it's still worth going in and trying your hardest, right? It's something that, you know, I think over time, and especially like as we're making like all these like matchmaking changes, you know, and we're trying to do like all these like tuning things, it's something that, you know, we might like put back like in the future, but for now, we're gonna like take, you know, baby steps, which is the, like putting in the like, you know, what is the like sort of rank of this particular match.
Yeah, we've been talking about it a lot. I mean, there's a challenge because it's like we want to show players more about matches, right? Like we want to kind of show, you know, how good these matches are. But it's hard because it's like finding ways, you know, like the charts that I was showing earlier, like those are kind of hard, especially if like it's on a screen that you're just seeing for a few seconds. Like, you know, kind of understanding some of that information can be difficult. And also, yeah, like Scott was saying, we don't want to create a situation where somebody's going to like, you know, not try their hardest because
we've already lost.
Yeah.
You know, like it's interesting. Like in StarCraft, actually, they used to show this where it was like, oh, you know, your team or you are favored to win, or the enemy is favored to win, and like that, that kind of works in a 1v1 game where you can be like, okay, I might lose this match. But in a team match where it's like your team is not favored to win, then it's like, well, why? Are my teammates bad? Like,
Yeah. Who's
But
Am I the
all the
bad?
better.
Yeah.
Let me
all the
answer.
better it feels
People
when
will
you're
always
actually
say
winning
their
as the
teammates are
underdog,
bad.
though. Like that's a confidence booster.
yeah. So if we could only get the good side of it, yeah. If we could only get the positive without the
Yeah.
negative, then
Yeah.
sure. But
Yeah. Again, it's hard to talk about a lot about like match, like this is the matchmaker's view of your quality, and like we can't just hit you with a bunch of math and like weird numbers that like that we're looking at, and because again, like we really want to make competitive play understandable, right?
Yeah.
That's a big,
So
big
that's
good focus.
so we just have to like we'd have to be like very careful of what we display to players, that they don't inadvertently take that information like the wrong way. It's like
Yeah, because so much of it needs to be contextualized, right? Like
it's
Mhm.
so much of it.
information.
12,000
Yeah.
healing guy
And
earlier.
again, it's like none of these numbers are absolute at the end of the day, right? It's like this is the matchmaker's current like best view of like what this match is, but it's like who knows? It's like maybe like once it makes the match, what everyone plays has a way bigger effect than like just putting the people in. It's like, is everyone playing like the super like hard meta like picks? What if someone's like trying something like different? It's like there's all these like different effects that once you actually get into the match, that
Yeah, we've been trying to study that a lot lately, actually.
Yeah.
Like what causes one-sided matches. Because it doesn't feel fun to like lose and you feel like you got stomped.
and people blame the matchmaker for
And
that.
Yeah.
Of course.
100%.
And it's funny, like we've been trying really hard to, like really the problem there is like what signal can we see that is actually predictive of like a stomp? And so far, we really haven't come up with a whole lot. We found a few things, that we've been able to kind of fix at the edges, but kind of the core problem just seems, like if one person's like having an off day, 4v5 is not, you don't win a 4v5. So,
And even if someone's not having a bad day, it's like, it's like two teams trying their hardest. It's like someone's going to win that first team fight.
yeah.
And the nature of Overwatch, it's like you win the first team fight, that gives you a little bit of like, ultimate economy edge. That potentially like gives you like an advantage like on the second team fight. Like
That's why push is scary.
there's things that like, and the matchmaker can't solve all those like kind of problems. It really can't, unfortunately.
You can see it on like control maps where like, on the first point, like one team might just like roll the other team and it's like, oh my God, like this is such a one-sided match. And then the next point, it happens the other way. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, wait, that happens all the time. And, so it's like in that case, that's probably actually a balanced match.
Yeah, I mean, you can only do so much math. At the end of the day, it's people playing, right? And turns out humans are not super consistent.
No,
So-
we're not robots, right?
Something I am excited
Yes.
for, though, I think,
Love you,
oh my
Flat.
goodness. For season 4, aren't we providing more context to the competitive updates to kind of help people understand how they're doing?
Thank you, Jody. Yes, we are. So one other thing we've been sort of asked for is, hey, we show you how many wins you have. Can we see how many losses and ties? And we're going to provide that. So again, not providing that is one of the things that made it seem like, it's like a competitive update happens, and sometimes I went up a division, sometimes I went down a division, and a lot of that was confusion because we didn't actually show you like the losses and
Yeah.
And
Why-
again,
So the original theory was they don't want to show you your losses because players don't like losing and they get more discouraged faster. But what that caused was way too many fuckers would win 7 games. They're like, I won 7 games in a row. Why didn't I climb? I went down. It's like you went 7 and 12, dumbass. Like, it was like, bro, you can't just forget the other 12 losses, dude. Like that, they didn't just go away. So like,
again, because we're all human, we sometimes forget about losses, just like we forget about like that leave that we might have had because family emergency or something like that, and we do penalize for leaves as well. So Yeah, we're including like more information there, specifically like the losses and ties.
And
Wait.
the
Damn, people will leave at the end of the game, so it won't count as losses. Leavers are so annoying. You know that's not true, right? Like, if they leave a game, they get a loss, and they get what's called a leaving penalty. So they actually almost get a double loss for doing that. So it's the opposite.
breakdown of where you are.
Oh yes. Well, okay. In specific, not so much like so. Once you actually complete an update, again, because like within a division, there's actually like there's a fair amount of wiggle room there. We got feedback saying it's like, hey, I went 5-4.
You get a loss if someone else leaves and you lose. Yes.
I didn't go up a division. It's like, Blizzard, why?
Wait, hang on.
Sorry,
I was answering a question.
Again, because like within a division, there's actually like there's a fair amount of wiggle room there. We got feedback saying it's like, hey, I went 5-4, and I didn't go up a division. It's like, Blizzard, why? It's because it's like, okay, you were actually like just barely into one division, and like you actually like you did go up. It's just it was all within one division.
Mm-hmm.
So again, to try to make things like more clear about like what's going on, and that like yes, it's like your 5-4 record does mean it went up at the point where you actually get that rank update after the 5 wins. We will be showing you like where you are within that particular division, and if you're someone who's between like GM1 and like the bottom of top 500, because there's this point where it's like, okay, how far do I need to get before I'm actually in top 500?
Big problem.
Not a lot of people, but it's like enough people. We've definitely heard the feedback that it's like, I want to know like how close I am. We'll also be indicating how close you are to achieving top 500 in a throw percentage. So
wait a minute, hang on. Did I misunderstand that? I'm going to back up.
Like,
sorry. Did they just like basically say they're bringing back SR?
And if you're someone who's between like GM1 and like the bottom of top 500, because there's this point where it's like, okay, how far do I need to get before I'm actually in top 500? And that's not a lot of people, but it's like enough people. We've definitely heard the feedback that it's like, I want to know like how close I am. We'll also be indicating how close you are to achieving top 500 in a throw percentage. So again, more information.
What's a percentage?
Like, updates, more clarity as far as here's how you played, and these are the results.
I really appreciate that. And something
Progress
else that we're doing
bars
for season 4 that I'm really excited about are the competitive reward changes.
Whoa, what?
So can we talk a little bit about like what that's going to look like and why we made that decision to change competitive rewards?
Yeah, so we're changing the competitive rewards. And again, to be specific here, these are these competitive points that you gain for playing competitive Overwatch that you use to purchase the golden guns. This isn't anything with challenges specifically, but like one thing we've always noted is that like if you're playing in bronze, like the difference between like how many competitive points we give you for like a bronze or even like a gold and like someone who's a grandmaster was really huge.
Yep.
So
I got
all
everything.
we're doing is just like providing more competitive points at the end of a season for everyone, like up through Grandmaster. Grandmaster's going down a little bit like at the end of the season, but the flip side is we want to reward people who play more like during the season.
Wait, GM's getting
we
nerfed.
Definitely like saw sort of thing of it's like, oh, it's like I've got my like gold 3 rank, or I'm done. Like there's no real reason to play like competitive play anymore. And it's like, hey, if you enjoy playing Overwatch, it's like, hey, here's some more competitive points. So we're upping the number of competitive points you get for a win, and also a tie. Because you do get a little bit like for a tie. We're upping that as well. Again, just to give people a little bit more. Hey, if you're playing a lot, we want to like respect the fact that you are playing a lot, because hey, by playing a lot, you're making the matchmaker better.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Aww.
That's awesome. I know another thing that's coming in. Actually, this is the mid-cycle patch. This is live right now. But we also have competitive mystery heroes coming to the game.
True.
Oh boy, competitive mystery
Oh,
heroes. We
boy.
are like,
Yes.
we are really excited about this because the chaos is going to be so exquisite.
I know.
Let us
Yeah.
stack.
Mascot to, like,
Scott,
explain
unleash.
competitive
Let us
mystery
stack.
heroes,
Lady
and he
Flats in
just
chat,
said,
hello,
it's
14
chaos.
months is a
Yeah, it was
crazy
just
amount
going to
of
be
time
great.
here is
You
Let
know,
us
it's
stack.
the kind of thing of like, you know, it's like people like really like trying hard and like trying to win this, but at the same time, it's like they have no control over the heroes. They have no control over their like their team compositions. So in some ways, it's actually the people who do well in competitive mystery heroes. We're gonna like flex their like skill in a way that
Yeah.
like actually normal competitive play doesn't, because they're just going to be super flexible.
Yeah, you
Right.
got to be good at everything.
You got to be good at everything,
In all
like
situations.
all the roles, all the heroes, all the maps. But that being said, we are like doing something. We do know that like competitive
Poker just
mystery
got
heroes,
rolled.
like,
What happened?
it's like we love chaos, but like we don't like just there are limits to our like our levels of chaos. We did put in a rule that basically says you can only like have as when it randomizes the heroes, it's only going to create team comps that
Yo,
like
Mods,
the
you guys
maximum
want to
of
fix
3 of
Boger?
any roll. So that was again sort of like prevent some of the like the worst or weirdest compositions. And then also we are doing because this isn't like a roll queue setup. This is also going to have the change that we made with regards to tanks and open queue or like non-roll queues. That
Yep.
sounded weird, but
That's
it's
cute.
accurate. So they're gonna have like lower health. So again, trying to make that like overall like it's like we want fair and balanced, but chaotic.
Crazy.
Let us
Crazy.
stack.
Still
But
balanced.
how do you
Let
make
us
that
stack. Let us
balance,
stack.
like in a competitive sense, like mystery heroes? Like, how do you balance those teams from a
Again, like I
for a
think
competitive standpoint?
I mean any individual game, the result is going to be like even more random, right? In
Yeah.
the sense of it's like you'll have some games where someone happened to like roll into like their best hero and like they play really well on it and maybe like dominate and like it's like all I got were my off-roll champions and so forth, and like, yeah, that's fine, but everyone's having that experience.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's always like some balancing out there, and sort of it's actually kind of like sort of an interesting thing about like Mr. Heroes. It's like when you do lose, it's like you can just blame. It's like, oh, we just had bad team comps.
Yeah. It's a good
Bad
excuse,
It's just
isn't it?
team ball. It's like you won't even blame the matchmaker,
Yeah.
right? It's great. It's like,
Stack.
hey, I just like I didn't roll a great set of heroes.
Stack.
But if you play enough,
Yeah.
then like all that kind of variance
Right.
will balance out, and the people that are better at playing more of the heroes should
makes
rise to the
sense.
top of the leaderboards, right?
Shit.
That's the theory.
Well, and
Yeah.
also dealing with uncertainty. Like I actually play Mystery Heroes a lot. I love the mode. It's such a fun mode. And one of the things that's really cool about Mystery Heroes is
Mr. Heroes
so,
Tuesday.
like, normally in Overwatch, it's very deterministic, right? Like you have control over kind of everything, or your team does at least, except whether you win, I guess. But like in games like Hearthstone, for example, kind of like dealing with randomness and uncertainty is like a very inherent part of the game, and so that is like a skill actually. It's like if you roll a mercy and your team already has 3 supports or something, like kind of like how do you play that? Do you like do you want to stay on mercy or
Go
do
in
you
and die.
Yeah, do you want to go in and die? Like
That's
Tactical
Just jump
feeding.
in.
Tactical feeding.
so there's like a very interesting kind of like strategic layer that it is a little bit crazy, but at the same time there's a lot of thought that you can kind of put in that's it's very dependent on like how good am I with this hero.
Don't kill the mercy.
What's
Stagger.
my team's team comp, what's the enemy team comp, and kind of doing that whole like calculus
Yeah.
to try to figure out like, is this actually a good hero for me to like kind of try to hold on to or not, or should I just
So we think at the end of that
competitive
competitive season, the people that are at the top of the leaderboard, they'll deserve to be there.
yeah,
Yeah,
oh, definitely.
those
Because
are
they're-
some Swiss Army knives of Overwatch.
Yes,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Like I said, there's a lot of excitement about it. I mean, there's lots of fans of Mystery Heroes,
Oh, absolutely.
on the team. I think it's still like our most favorite. It's like our most played
Yeah, it's
arcade.
a really
It's our most
popular
played
game mode.
arcade
Because we
card.
all like chaos.
Yes,
So much
Mr. Heroes
Yes.
Tuesday.
Chaotic.
Yes,
I do
embrace
wonder,
it.
This might be a really stupid question. The answer might be
Oh.
super obvious, and I just don't know. But does the result I have in a competitive Mystery Heroes like obviously that's locked on my account, like that's my MMR for Mystery Heroes. Does that bleed into other competitive like normal competitive play or like quick play? So if I say I get really unlucky very often in Mystery Heroes by rolling off heroes constantly, and then obviously I'm losing all of those games, but I technically do good in normal competitive play, will the other MMR affect that MMR and my account overall?
That's a really good question. So for
Yes.
competitive modes, each rating, because it's tied to a rank, it's player visible. Those are very distinct. So like you can do whatever you want in competitive Mystery Heroes, and it will not have any impact on the other game modes. For unranked, we do have a little bit more kind of like of a shared understanding of your ratings. Because in those modes we're really just trying to optimize for like fair matches with a 50% win rate. But for ranked, we're showing you those
Quick
ranks.
play,
We're
force
not
50-50.
changing those out from underneath you. So like that rank is just for competitive Mystery Heroes.
Yeah. So when you lose in competitive Mystery Heroes, you're not gonna need to get upset and say like, oh my, am I gonna lose GM? Am I gonna lose GM? No. It's like, no, don't worry about that.
You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to try out competitive Mystery Heroes.
Yeah,
I'm
cool.
all
I'm
here
super
for the
excited.
chaos.
So
Yeah.
could we have Overwatch League play competitive Mystery Heroes, do you think? Like just for season
Yes. I'll spearhead that idea. I think that's gonna go down really well.
Okay. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, this has been really helpful, and we really appreciate the insight. And I know throughout this we've kind of talked about how we should have communicated this, or like we should have done this better. And
Yeah.
I just really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here and like really outline this for the community.
Real.
And I'm really happy with everything that you guys said. I appreciate the insight, and it's been epic talking with you guys. These are really important topics to our community. So
Real.
Yeah, we should do this again.
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes!
Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you guys so much.
Do it again.
Yeah, and sharing
thank
your
you.
thoughts. And we talked about all the factors that go into changing Matchmaker, and like this is true for Matchmaker, it's also true for our game, but community sentiment and community feedback means a lot to us. We see you, we hear you, and we are implementing that into our plans, and it helps us make decisions. So please keep sharing your feedback. We're really happy to have these conversations with players, and thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the mid-cycle patch.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Thanks.
All right, that was actually really good. I ain't gonna lie, that was actually very, very, very good. Probably one of the best things, one of the best dev streams we've ever gotten. Real talk. They talked about a lot of stuff. That felt like therapy. I feel like there was a lot of things they talked about that I've tried to explain to people for years, but it's hard to explain to them, like certain moments and certain things, because it's like, it sound like harebrained half the time.
That was fantastic.
But that was awesome. That was actually really good. I feel like there's so many things in there that need to be like clipped and held on to for context for the future. But yeah, that was awesome. I hope that we get more of those in the future. And yeah, it sounds like we need to schedule some Mystery Heroes. Sounds like we need to schedule some Mystery Heroes. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, apparently everyone loves Mystery Heroes. We play Mystery Heroes every Tuesday. Mystery Heroes Tuesday. Sounds like a match made in heaven.